For context, I started an OnlyFans account over the summer to support myself through school, and things were great until I posted my Amazon wishlist. Amazon doesn't release your address to people who gift you items, but third-party sellers can, and that's where it went wrong. By the way, not trying to promote it here. This is a very frightening story, and I feel like it should be shared. In late July, I got a puppy. One night around 2 a.m., I took him outside to go to the bathroom. While he was doing his business, I noticed a car parked outside my family home. I saw a figure in the car and could tell they were looking at me, but I couldn't make out their face because it was pitch black outside. Feeling a bit uneasy, I picked up my puppy to take him back inside, and when I started to move, the car parked in my driveway. I sprinted back inside and locked the door, but they never approached my house. The next morning, I went to check the mail. There was an envelope addressed to my OnlyFans name with $20 in it, but no note. I was currently still at home with my parents who had no idea about my OnlyFans account, so I didn't mention it to them. A week later, I moved back to my college town to get ready to start school. At this time, I had stopped posting for the time being until I could figure out how they got my address. I've watched enough crime shows to know there's a possibility I could be in danger. I live in a duplex with a gated parking lot for reference. One morning, I was planning on vlogging my trip to Target because I was planning on starting a YouTube channel in the near future since OnlyFans felt unsafe. When I got to my car, it had been ransacked during the night and my vlogging camera was missing. I know it's my fault for leaving it in my car, but I was using it the night before, and since I live in a gated area, I didn't think I would be unsafe. It wasn't in plain sight either. I had hidden it in my glove box. I used that camera to film my content, and the SD card that was in there had all of my unreleased photos and videos. I know they stole it just for the SD card. Anyways, this is where the story gets weird. There are cameras outside in the parking lot, so we were able to watch this person break into my car and find the camera. And they didn't touch any of the other cars on the lot. They knew which car was mine, which suggests they had been watching me for a bit. After they got the camera, they walked around the duplex until stopping near my window. My bedroom faces an outside street and my blinds are broken, so it's very easy to see in. I have a curtain, but it doesn't cover my window all the way. This person watched me sleep for an hour or so. I have no idea why they didn't try to break in, but thank God they didn't. This person then sold the camera to a pawn shop, and since I knew the serial number, the police were able to find it. However, my SD card was missing. I believe the police are still trying to track them down, but I have broken my lease and moved to a new place, so hopefully that will keep me safe. This happened a few years ago to me when I was still living in my childhood home in California. I had just inherited my family home, so my cousin decided to move in with my husband and I while she was attending a college nearby. My cousin and I were both working at the Lego store at the time, but I only worked mornings and my husband and cousin worked nights, so there were many nights where I was alone. A couple of weeks before this happened, I had been taking stuff out of my car when I realized a strange brown van with no back windows parked across the street. As I put the stuff in the trunk, the man in the van started making weird noises at me. I turned to see if I could get a look at his face, but his black Giants baseball cap was pulled down really far. Thinking he was just a creepy guy, I flipped him off and went back into the house. About 2 hours later, I went outside to go somewhere, and he was still parked across the street. Not thinking anything of it, I hopped in my car and headed to my friend's house. As I was driving, I looked in my rearview mirror and saw the same brown van following me. I turned on a whole bunch of streets and he followed me down all of them. I turned onto the road that my father-in-law lived on and parked, thinking if the guy tried anything, I could just run there and be safe. When I pulled over in front of my father-in-law's house, the van slowly drove by. I looked into the van, and the man put his hand into a gun position with his index and middle finger out and thumb pointed up, pointed at me and mouthed the word, "Bang." After that, he hurried and sped off. Now, I had always been a little leery of staying home alone. My house had always given me the creeps because of how poorly lit it was. When I was alone at night, I usually just stayed in the kitchen because it was the brightest room in the house. I was watching a TV show on my computer when all of a sudden I hear a banging on the front door and the handle jiggling. It startled me for a moment until I looked at the time and saw it was around 10 p.m. and knew my cousin was going to be coming home from work about that time. I got up and opened the door. But nobody was on the porch. I shouted my cousin's name out, but still no response. I called my cousin's cell, and immediately she was like, "Oh, hey, I'm on my way home from work right now." Before I could say anything else, there were 3 extremely loud bangs on the back door that connected the kitchen and the garage. And the knob was shaking violently. I slammed the front door closed, locked and chained it, and ran for my room. My aunt called me while my cousin called the police, and I stayed under a blanket until my cousin arrived. When she came and got me, I was led outside to talk to the police. I was trying to explain what had happened, but the officers along the side of my house were distracting me. I walked over to where they were, but one of the police officers held me back. They opened the gate and saw that the door of my garage, which we always leave locked, was wide open. All of the officers in the area pulled out their guns and went into the garage, but nobody was in there. Afterwards, the police told me it was just probably some kids messing around, but if I ever get scared at home, to just call them and they'll send someone out. About a week later, I was watching something in my living room with my cousin and my husband. As I was passing by the window next to my front door, I realized there was a guy wearing the same baseball cap as the guy in the van standing outside on the sidewalk, staring at the house. When he noticed me watching, he immediately locked eyes with me and slowly gave me the creepiest smile I had ever seen. I turned and yelled for my husband to go out there, but when I turned back around, he was gone. I will say that the baseball cap in question is really generic, and a lot of Giants fans wear it, so I can't say it was the same exact guy since I never saw his face before now, but my gut told me it was. 3 days after that, I was home alone at night again. I was on the edge, but I was trying to ignore it, telling myself that I was going to be okay. I was baking cookies in the kitchen when I thought I heard a knock at my sliding door glass. My whole body tensed up, and I slowly turned towards the door. The lights in the backyard were off, and the kitchen ones were on, so the glare in the window made it impossible to see if someone was outside. Everything was silent for a few seconds before someone banged on the front door again. I screamed, but felt paralyzed in fear. The person ran on the deck from the sliding glass door to the 2 windows in the living room and started knocking on them as well. They came back to the sliding glass door to knock and started trying to open the door. I finally came to my senses, grabbed my keys, and ran outside into my car. I locked myself in my car and dialed 911. We sold our house shortly after that. I still have a hard time staying home alone, even though I'm 2 states away now.
It was the summer of 2016, and I just married my longtime girlfriend. Over the course of our 12-year relationship, we have traveled to the mountains several times in both summer and winter for camping, but also to stay in the nice mountain hotels and snowboard the slopes. Naturally, we both agreed this was how we wanted to spend our first few weeks of our marriage. We booked a 20-day stay at a mountainside campground on the other side of the country. We also decided to bring our dogs with us, as they too love being outdoors, and we generally bring them camping anyways. After 2 days of road tripping, we had arrived, quickly set up and settled in for a good long stay on the mountain. It was beautiful. A couple of days into our trip, and we had already met a bunch of fellow campers. We are very experienced, so we generally attract a lot of attention from novice campers asking for tools or supplies as they see we are well set up. We are usually more than happy to help people get situated if they need matches, cream or sugar, or help setting up their equipment. It was day 4 or 5 when she first made her presence known to us. I will refer to this person as she or her, as we never learned her name. We were sitting down under the shade of a large pine tree at the edge of our site, drinking beers and playing cards, when she seemingly appeared out of nowhere. She was just suddenly right there. "Can I pet your dog?" she asked. Even my dogs didn't see her approach, as the very sound of her voice triggered them into a startled frenzy. As the dogs were worked up already, I politely told her no. Then she stood there at the edge of our site. Didn't say a word. Just stood there, sort of existing, but not really doing anything. She wasn't really staring at us or looking at anything in particular. I asked her if she needed anything, and she said no. After a few minutes, she walked off. I work with people with brain injuries, so I've had a fair share of experiences with unusual behavior, including people with poor social skills, so I wasn't about to write this person off as creepy just yet, but she had my attention. I casually watched her walk off and enter a campsite across the path and a few sites down from ours. There was already a small tent set up on the site, but she proceeded to pull out an even smaller single-person tent from her backpack and began setting it up. The day prior, we saw 2 young girls set up the other tent and were clearly the occupants of the site. There was no further interactions with her that day, although we did notice that the owners of the other tent on the site were not around at all that day, and we didn't see them return that night. Well, the next morning, I'm walking to the camp showers to clean up for the day. As I walk past her site, I see her sitting in the little tent, reading a book. The door to the tent is open. I pay no attention and keep on my way to take my shower. When I'm done with my shower and walking back, I notice her tent is now closed, but it's jiggling about, so I know someone's in there. Then she made her presence known in a big way. Just as I'm approaching her site on my way to mine, she unzips her tent and I immediately see she is completely nude. She then positions herself just inside the tent at the door and lets out this over-the-top full-body stretch and held her arms way up to the sky while pushing her chest forward like it was some kind of mating ritual designed just for me. While she does this, she lets out what I can only describe as an exotic moan. It was pretty obvious she was putting on a show for me. I continue on my way to my site and tell my wife about the display I'd just been witness to. We both laughed it off and moved on with our plans to hike a good trail to a waterfall. The trailhead for this hike was accessible from the campgrounds, so we didn't have to drive to get there. We just walked the additional 2 kilometers to the trail. We walked at a good pace, so when we got to the trail, we decided to stop for a few minutes and take some photos of the surrounding mountains before we head into the thicker bush. After sitting there for maybe 5 minutes while my wife is taking pictures, the girl emerges from the trail that leads towards the campground. At first I thought, okay, coincidence. She's staying here and this is a pretty common trail, but then she sees that I see her and she stops dead in her tracks and just stands there. Same demeanor as our first encounter, just standing, not doing anything in particular, but also sending creepy vibes our way. This was the first time I said to my wife, "I think we have a stalker." Confused, my wife then looks to where I'm looking and is immediately a little creeped out. Once again, I think, whatever, maybe she's just hiking the trail, no big deal. So we continue on the trail at a good pace, and she maintains a constant distance behind us. Our dogs at this point are a little distracted by her, and our youngest dog keeps turning around to watch her. I got a little fed up with the dogs constantly stopping to look back, so I decided we will stop for some water and let this woman pass. Well, what does she do? Stops walking when we stop, and once again just stands there. Okay, so now we are generally concerned, because this is approaching horror/suspense movie creepy level, and I started to wonder what this girl's intentions are. Standing motionless at that distance and refusing to pass us, just ramping up the creepy factor to about a 9. So my wife and I decide to cut the hike short by taking the shorter loop, which is only another half kilometer ahead, and head back to our camp. We managed to get some distance between us by jogging every time we would make a turn, and she was out of sight. We didn't see her again until later that night. That night, my wife decided to take an evening shower at the camp showers. When she returned to our camp, she tells me our stalker was in the bathrooms also taking a shower. This time, however, she was with 2 other girls and appeared to be getting ready for a night at the club. There's a nearby ski town that has a few nightclubs and bars, so it was reasonable to see the girls getting ready for a night out. The 2 girls she was with were the 2 we saw previously set up at the other side. My wife explained that she quickly picked up on the fact that the 2 girls and our stalker friend were not well known to each other. It was clear that the 2 girls were close friends with plans to go out partying, and our stalker was making an attempt to be friends and sort of invited herself to join them in their night out. Now we know the ski town well, and the girls kept reinforcing that they were meeting at a specific restaurant before going to the bar. It was currently 10:30 p.m., and we know the restaurants they were telling her to go to was closed at 10 p.m. They were lying to her about their plans. The stalker kept asking them too, "Are you sure this place? Are you sure?" They convinced her, and she left to her tent to finish getting ready while the 2 friends stayed in the bathroom to finish their makeup. My wife went on to explain after the girl left, the 2 friends were mocking and making fun of her. They were young 20-somethings, acting like little girls in elementary school. My wife has no time for that. Creepy stalker or not, she had to say something to the girls. My wife called them out on their behavior. Well, putting all the catty bullying aside, the girls explained to my wife that the stalker girl had set up her tent on their site when they were staying with a friend in the ski town. When they returned, they found her living at their site without invitation. She had taken it upon herself to take a little corner of their site without knowing them at all. The girls said they were upset with her and trying to make her feel uncomfortable so she would leave, but she wouldn't leave. Of course, my wife asked them, why didn't they just report her to the park warden? The excuse they gave was they were leaving the next day and didn't want to make a huge deal out of it. So whatever happened between them and the fake late dinner plans and clubbing is unknown to us. About 3 a.m. that same night, we all awoke to a blood-curdling scream right outside our camper. At first I was like, dang, that must be a wild animal. My wife is trembling, dogs barking, and I'm startled but curious. I peel back the window cover to see her standing motionless on the path outside our trailer. I had the window cover down, maybe 8 to 10 centimeters, when she appears to make direct eye contact with me. My heart rate is jacked. What the actual hell? After gazing in my direction for what seemed like an eternity, she calmly turns around and walks to her tent. I go make sure our trailer is locked. After a good hour and a stiff whiskey, we manage to go back to sleep. So the next day is a Friday, and we have friends from a nearby major city coming up to the mountains to spend the weekend with us. We haven't seen them in a while, so we are excited for a couple days together. Well, they are not at our site for 15 minutes, and as they are setting up their tent, she mysteriously appears out of nowhere yet again. Like bam, there she is. But now this time, she's actually in our sight. I haven't had a chance to tell our friends about her before she arrived, so they were a little more friendly than I was. She asked me once again if she can pet my dog, who during all of this is barking at her. I think I said something like, "She isn't being very friendly towards you right now, so I'd prefer if you didn't." She didn't pet my dog, but she also just stood there, staring at me, like she was considering how she would dismember my limbs. She then notices our friend's tent brand as he's still setting it up, and comments how it's the same model as hers, although a larger sleeping capacity. My buddy has picked up on the creepy vibes, and my general displeasure with her presence, so just gives her the, "Oh yeah, cool," and keeps setting it up. Well, she starts grabbing at the tent pegs and picks up the hammer, and she says she will help him set it up because she has experience with it. My buddy declines and asks for his tools back. Cue the psychopath stare down, but this time she has a hammer in hand, adding to the "oh crap" factor. She literally just drops everything right there and runs off. I go on to explain the last few days to our friends, and they agree we need to keep an eye on her. So by this time, the two girlfriends whose site has been hijacked were packed up and gone. It's now Friday night, and we've been drinking all day, so we're feeling pretty good. It's maybe around 11 p.m. when she walks over to our site again. She says, "Hey, you guys seem to have a lot of extra room with the tent and the camper. Do you think I could stay with you guys tonight? We could have a lot of fun in there together." My buddy is feeling pretty good from all the day beers, so he's pretty forward when he replies, "Did you just propose a gangbang to us?" Now this whole time, I'm just sitting there in my camp chair with my whiskey, taking this all in. She wasn't really taking notice to me at all so far. Then she smiles, turns her head and looks directly down at me and says, "I like your friend." She then turns around and walks away into the darkness of the night towards the forest. What the hell? We're all now terrified she's gonna return. I decide right then and there, if we see her again in a creepy fashion, I'm calling the park warden. This is getting silly. Well, the night is winding down, so we all decide to walk together to the bathrooms to clean up for bed. My wife pulls on my hoodie and says, "Babe, look." I look over to see the site that the girl was set up on is completely destroyed. Stuff everywhere, just tons of garbage, clothing, and food, everywhere. I thought, okay, this is weird. Could this have been a bear? No, we would have heard it. I then noticed that the tent is gone. She is gone and left the site a complete mess. As luck would have it, the park patrol was completing their fire rounds and were at the messed up site when we were returning from the bathrooms. We told them there was a girl staying there who was acting erratic, and we suspected she was squatting on the site based on our conversation with the two girls from earlier in the week. We didn't see her for the rest of our trip until the last full day. There's a great little lookout point not far from our site, which has an amazing view of the river in the valley below, and it was a perfect evening to see the sunset behind the mountains. It was a lovely final send-off to an otherwise beautiful honeymoon. Just when we thought we were done with her, she emerged once again from seemingly nowhere. We were sitting on a couple chairs that were bolted in place at the viewpoint, taking pictures of the valley below. As my wife is looking through the camera viewfinder, she picks up on the woman in the distance. She is standing in the woods a little ways down the mountain towards the valley, watching us. As her final act, she walks up the mountainside and sat right beside us on a boulder that was right beside the chairs. She says nothing, just sits there. My wife has a brilliant idea of asking me to take one last picture of the scenery, and she gives me a little wink. I pick up on her idea right away, and I position myself so this woman is going to be in the picture. My wife wanted this lady's photo in the event something bad happens with her before we leave the area. We took our final looks out at the beautiful scenery and head to our camp for the night. We didn't see or hear from her again. Upon reflection, we agreed this woman had some serious mental health issues, obviously. She had zero social skills, and we did witness her attempt to make friends with those two girls that shafted her in a terrible way. That being said, she did things way beyond the realm of acceptable social awkwardness. There were moments I thought she would pull out a knife and kill us all where we stood. More than that, the stalking, the midnight screaming and running off into the woods at night was terrifying to us, and I feel a story worthy of sharing. I do have the photo on a thumb drive somewhere, and it's a reminder of our wild adventure and start of our amazing marriage.